Hi there, and welcome to my LinkedIn Live. I'm April Callis-Birchmeier, and I'm a certified change management professional and project management professional, as well as a certified speaking professional. And I'm really excited to talk to you today about how we can help leaders. I want to talk a little bit about leading the way and how leaders can champion change management success, and why it's so critical to have our leaders really working for success of our change management effort. Many years ago, I read something in the PMI Pulse, and I think it is still true, and it is still recorded every other year when they do the PMI Pulse surveys. And that was that sponsors had to be visible and active, supporting the change for the change to be successful. And I completely agree. I really believe that the sponsor's role in being active and visible and promoting that change is essential for the success of the change. And when we don't have sponsors who know how to help us lead the way and what to do to encourage change management success, then we are really struggling as a project and as an organization. So I'll just back up a little bit. When we're talking about organizational change management, what I'm really describing are the tools and techniques and the process used to help people um, move from their current state to a future state. So what they're currently doing, whether it's a current computer program, current system we're using, whether it's a some sort of a current organizational structure, and then moving to the future state. And that future state is looking at, how are we going to use a new system in the future? How are we going to do things more effectively or efficiently in our organizational structure? What type of new program are we implementing for our stakeholders? And so many times our project teams are led by, a project management group. And sometimes we have change management as a part of that PM group, as a part of that project team. And sometimes change management is brought in a little bit later as a part of the business that's coming to assist with this project. But either way of whether or not you have project management and change management embedded together, or if you have them as separate functions but working together on the same project, the big piece of our success is really on the shoulder of the sponsor. And the sponsor is the person, and sometimes we say or department, but I really prefer to say the person who is responsible and accountable for that change. So when we have a sponsor, and I'll tell you, I've been working with a recent client who said they had two sponsors and gave me two names. But when I asked who is actually the primary sponsor, there was just one, because that organization understands that only one person can be the primary sponsor, and they really get it with that. So they have two people sort of working together in activities and leadership, but one is the primary sponsor. So when we think about how to successfully lead change as a sponsor, or maybe you're wondering, how do I help my sponsor to become more involved in change? Um, that's what I wanted to talk about today, how we can lead the way and help our sponsors champion change management success. So I've had a lot of sponsors over the years. Sometimes when I was earlier in my career, I was a little intimidated by sponsors. They were, high up in the organization. I felt a little nervous about engaging with them and talking with them about what I knew needed to happen to make this change successful. And I had to get over that. I had to get past that for myself. It took a while. I think experience helped me, but also what really helped me to get over myself and get over my own fears about my standing in the organization with the sponsor was just the knowledge that I had of the importance of their role, and the fact that because I knew that their role was so important, I was able to be of assistance to them by planning the strategy for that sponsor and then helping that sponsor um, to work through the activities of their sponsorship to ensure that we had complete stakeholder engagement. So let me give you an example. Uh, I had a sponsor who did not see the need for a change management meeting with me. And I was really kind of backing off a little bit. I was nervous, honestly, about insisting on meeting time because, I had asked if we could meet. Um, I asked if we could meet once a week, and she kind of laughed at me and said, I'm triple booked every hour of every day, and I understood that, but so I asked what I should do, and she said, well, why don't you come? I'll meet you at the project meetings. We'll talk then. Well, I went to 3 weeks worth of project meetings and realized I hadn't seen her at all. And I hadn't seen anybody from her team. So I wasn't even sure her team was aware of the things we were discussing in the project meetings. And I knew they weren't aware of the change management activities that I was hoping that she would be able to help with. And when I say activities, I am talking about things that the sponsor actually does, like gives a presentation or attends a meeting and talks with stakeholders about the change. Um, Maybe we even have a sponsor who is just having conversations with people out in the field. Or perhaps we have a sponsor who is presenting at a conference. Those are activities. Other activities are things like, creating a video or maybe recording a podcast. But all of these activities that the sponsor does um, should be aligned to the strategic plan that we have for our sponsor. So the first step was that I really thought about, this sponsor was incredibly busy, so busy, and I did have a strategic plan for her, but I really was not able to get engaged with her in any way. So I went and I begged. I did. I begged her admin if she could please find a place where I could talk to her once a week. I would take 15 minutes. I would take 30 minutes. I'd be thrilled with 30. And her admin said, I found 15 minutes for you. She said, you both are walking from this building to another building every week to go to the same meeting, and you can have that walk, that 15-minute walk. I was so happy. I was really thrilled. And I got my strategy together and I started to create the sponsor communication and the sponsor activities that I needed from the sponsor. Now, I didn't expect my sponsor, who was busy, I did not expect her to be able to think of her own activities. I didn't expect her to be able to write her own communications, like emails or videos or something that we were doing a large flyer or big alert. I just knew she didn't have the time for that. But what I did do was I walked with her every week for my 15-minute meeting, and I shared with her an engaging leader's brief. And this brief document was so powerful because it had 2 rows of information. That was it, 2 rows in 3 kind of bubbles, ovals. And I had 2 or 3 bullet points in each bubble. And the first the first column said communication this week on the top row. And I had 2 or 3 communications going out that week. And then the second row, or the second bubble, the second column said activities this week. And those were activities like attend a town hall meeting, ensure that we have you representing our department at a large statewide function. And so those were the activities. And then I had the third column said, keep your eye on. And this was my little warning for her, maybe not a risk register of any sort, but really just a little bit of a, intuition. Like we're hearing rumblings over here. It seems that there's some issues going on. Maybe we're having a project problem. Maybe we're just having a problem with another area department. Whatever it was that I thought she should keep her eye on, I would put it in that list. And then the bottom row of this document had the same 3 columns. So it's like communication next week. And these were emails and communication that was going out next week. And it said activities next week. And these were the activities I asked her to participate in next week. And then it said celebrate. And these were celebration activities for the team, things we could celebrate that were related to the project team, related to stakeholders or milestones, because the sponsor is so busy. They don't have time always to think about, boy, where's an area where we could call out somebody and recognize them or celebrate a milestone. So I would give her this document. Anything in the top row that was happening this week, it was pretty much set in stone, concrete, slushy concrete. If we canceled the project, we could cancel those things, but generally those were untouchable. But the things in next week's row and columns, the communication, the activities, and what to celebrate, she could certainly have, access to edit emails or give her input on slides or on some sort of presentation that we were putting together. So this became my engaging leaders brief that I walked with my sponsor every single week and gave to her so that she would know what was happening. Now, one of the interesting things was at the bottom of the document, I always put down key message for this week. And, on most projects, we have 5 or 6 key messages. And I would just rotate those key messages depending on our milestones, depending on where we were in the project, depending on what was happening in the world, and also depending on just the fact that I needed to get those messages out the door. So it really gave her a terrific way, a structure for her to understand what we were talking about, what she needed to show up and do and engage in with our stakeholders, and also some of the important things to know about the project, not only what we could celebrate, but maybe where things were a little needed to be shored up. Let's say it that way. So that was my engaging leaders brief. It still works incredibly well. And then I also wanted to talk with her about her visibility. The fact that I was walking with her once a week was really helpful to me, but I needed to encourage her to be really visible, really seen as the leader of the project. And I knew we were starting to make an impact when I went to a conference. It was about an hour and a half from my home office. I went out to this conference to talk about the project and share information, and my sponsor was there. I said, "Oh, I didn't even realize you would be here. What are you doing here?" And she said, "Well, it was on my sheet that I should be here, so here I am." And so she had been at the conference the entire time to ensure that she was visible and accessible to people who were actually going to be impacted by this big change. So that was a really important learning for me, because when I discovered that despite her schedule, we were able to connect and help. I was able to help her be more effective in her role and in being visible and active. It was a game changer. It really was, for the entire project. So how do you fit this into a very busy sponsor schedule? Well, I think I may have given you an idea about how to find meeting time. I also think that the more that we can do for our sponsor, like giving them an easy button, the better for the sponsor. So, I've had people say, well, I don't think we should have to do everything for the sponsor. I'll tell you, I am of the opposite opinion, because I feel like our sponsors are very busy with their job. They have a lot of responsibility in the organization in addition to being a sponsor for the change. And so wherever I can make their lives easier, I do so. So if that's writing emails, if that's creating presentations, maybe I do all of the parts of a presentation except for that moment that the sponsor is going to speak. I have even conducted Zoom calls and recorded a conversation with the sponsor, and then taken just the sponsor's part of it and done an FAQ read back with it to create sort of an FAQ of the sponsor talking to stakeholders. And I just think that there's so many opportunities. Now, I am not suggesting that uh, you know, create an AI sponsor and allow your AI sponsor to do all the work, but having an AI fallback for your sponsor to have a little leverage, a little relief from the amount of work that they have to do, I think is really, really helpful. I think that the sponsor has so many expectations also because they are accountable for the funding generally and the results of the change, achieving the expected benefit of the change. We need to provide that sponsor with some tools and ways to measure where we are. And when I'm in a change, when I'm in the midst of the execution of the plans in the change. So I'm executing on the communication plan, I'm executing the stakeholder engagement plan, we're executing the learning and development plan, we're executing the measurement and benefit realization plan. We need to share that the results of the measurement and benefit realization plan with the sponsors in a very easy to digest, easy to discuss way so that the sponsor knows where we are. Are we making progress? Are we at risk? Are we standing still? People don't know things. People do know things. The sponsor needs to have a lot of information. And sometimes there's a fear of sharing negative information with a sponsor. And I don't think that we should ever be fearful about that. The sponsors are generally have risen to a pretty influential role in their organizations, which means they have experience with good news as well as bad news. They have dealt with bad news, negative news in the past. So when we think about, what do I do if something's not turning out right? I want my sponsor to have this rosy picture to paint at all times. It's not We don't always have a rosy picture to paint at all times, particularly through change. We're going to run into resistance. We might have some sponsor resistance. We might have some issues with people feeling like they weren't included early enough and now they're frustrated and upset that they didn't know this was happening or that their suggestions were not incorporated into the final product. Those things will happen in a change. They do happen. And I think what's really important to recognize is that despite things not being perfect and maybe going wrong at sometimes, we can still move forward in the change. We can still help people move through the change in behavior and mindset that they need to adopt the change. We can still have the organizational structure and processes of that organization be revisited and revised so that the new process is able to be implemented and adopted. There's so much that we can do, even if things aren't going the way that we had hoped when we had our very rosy expectations. But the biggest thing I have found is to let the sponsor help with those solutions. Let the sponsor help with communicating the bad news. Let the sponsor help when we have to share with our stakeholders that we have a delay or that things are not going to be as easy as we had hoped they would be. I'm working with a client right now where they had very high hopes for rolling out a multi-industry project that would all go live together. But what they discovered in sort of a painful stop and start process over the last year, they discovered that they had to take it one industry at a time. So they are bringing live one small group at a time. And it's clunky. It's not perfect, but everybody is tolerating the imperfection, working together to find solutions, and getting this product up and running so that then they can turn their attention to the next group. So rather than try to bring everybody live at the same time, there's this series, this waves of going live with the different products over time. And instead of doing a hard launch where we flip the switch and say, okay, everybody has to use the new system now, there's a soft launch where if you can use the new system, fantastic, right? If you can use this new system, do so. Because what I think is sometimes we, as change professionals, we expect sort of a flip of the switch and then people adopt. When we can help our sponsor and we can help our stakeholders who are going live with a change navigate sometimes the bumpy, not perfect implementation, it gets us so much further along than if we were trying to force everybody to go live in the same way at the same time. And, I'll be cheering up and down about it. We can tolerate some frustration as we go through a real transformation. It's necessary and it's human, and we're not robots yet. So we have to uh, incorporate this tolerance and this understanding and assume positive intent, which I find to be really um, somewhat of a magical assumption. Many times, and I don't know if you've ever experienced this in your organization, but many times in an organization, when things go a little bit sideways or maybe aren't done quite as well as we had hoped, there's a lot of finger pointing and a lot of chatter. I'll say chatter about some group letting another group down, or they never do this right, or this group is always difficult to work with. And yet, if we assume that everybody has positive intent in their actions, it can actually help us to get along together and to feel more connected to each other. When we can help our sponsor assume positive intent for any sort of measurement that comes their way and any understanding of how things are going, and they know that everybody is trying hard to do the right thing, and they assume that positive intent, that sponsor can really help the team by being understanding and having their backs. There's nothing worse, I think, than reaching out and saying, like, gosh, things are not going well, and then being blamed by a sponsor, because that really means they don't have your back and you really feel that lack of help, and it really impacts the project success. So I think one of the big keys is a sponsor kickoff, where we talk with the sponsor about the strategy we've built, about the way that they interact with things, about how we envision this change rolling out. And by working with the sponsor in this way, we can help them to also have the same vision of their role and how to be active and visible to help the project and the stakeholders adopt that change. So, if you're interested in learning more about how to help your sponsor really successfully lead change, or if you are a sponsor and you would like to do a better job of leading change, I would love to connect with you. We have our next cohort of the Ready, Set, Change Accelerated Training and Exam Prep course beginning on April 24th. And this is a 3-week program where you learn the standard for change management, you learn the Ready framework and how to lead change successfully, and you'll also submit your application and do exam prep for the Certified Change Management Professional exam. So if this is something you're interested in, please visit my website. It's pretty easy to get to. It's April at springboard-consult.com. So the word springboard ready-consult.com, and you will see our website. We have the Ready, Set, Change training right there on the front page on Academy. So I hope this has been helpful to you. If you are a sponsor and you would love to have some more tips and tricks, let me know. If you are a change practitioner or wish to be, or a project manager who is leading change, or even HR professionals who are in the role of a change management professional, just reach out to me. I'd be happy to chat and to share information about how to help your sponsor so that they can lead change successfully. Thanks for joining me, and I'll be back in 2 weeks to talk more about organizational change management and all the ways that we can help our stakeholders and our sponsors and yourselves to adopt change more effectively, more easily, and with less stress. Take care.